ChatGPT is putting our consulting skills to the test. Next on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
Here we go.
A.J., today is Black Shirt Day.
It is. The uniform is on.
Yep,
set.
That's right. If you're watching on YouTube, we did not coordinate our shirts today. So today we're doing something a little bit, I want to say a little bit different. We did a similar episode to this. It's been a very long time. I'm going to say at least a year, maybe longer. Been a long time. In which, in this previous instance, I created a fake scenario, case study type thing, and I put AJ to the test. How would you resolve this issue? He created a scenario or two for me, and we took turns. I think we did 2 each or something like that. In this instance, it's been since the last time we did something similar, ChatGPT has been invented. So we thought this time
thing has been invented since we did it.
Huh? Yeah,
a whole new thing has been invented. That's amazing.
It's a crazy new world. Yeah. So we thought that today's episode would be both fun and illuminating, though. For fun because genuinely, I've typed in the prompt. I tested the prompt to see to make sure it was creating some decent kinds of things. And it did a good job. So I said, great job. Give me 3 more just like that. But so there's 3 more queued up. I haven't seen. I don't know anything about them. And so when we read them here in the episode, it'll be the first time we've heard it too. So I thought that would be fun. But here's why I think it's going to be helpful for you, or why I hope it will be helpful for you at least, is I think one of the things that AJ and I and our whole team of certified guides has the privilege of doing is we encounter new situations all the time, and we have to, in real time, try to think it through. We have a framework that if you've listened to the podcast for a long time, you know what that framework is, our strategic envisioning framework and our leadership pipeline frameworks help us think through problems. And so we're constantly taking that framework that we have for understanding what a healthy church is and how it operates. And then when we're encountered with a problem, we're trying to pass it through that framework to help us diagnose what the problem is. And so I actually think it might be helpful for you to hear us try to do that in real time. Like, okay, now here's what the problem is. Now let me take our principles that we have, our framework that we have, and let's see if we can apply these principles and diagnose the issue and apply a solution. So think of it like how to think like a church consultant type of episode. So it's fun for us. I hope it's illuminating for you. And that's what we're doing today in the episode. Anything you want to add to that, AJ, before we dive in?
Yeah, we're certainly going to have to take some liberties in filling in the blanks because nothing is ever easy. And so I'm anticipating you and I both are going to be like, but what? There's not enough background.
What else is going on here? Yeah.
What are the details?
There's no follow-up to this. Yeah.
We might have to make up some details just to fill in the blanks to go, okay, well, maybe here's what we should do. So there's a huge limitation here when we're speaking with one of you on a Zoom call and you're telling us about your church. Obviously, we can ask a lot of questions and get more background.
Yeah.
So this is a super hypothetical, but it'll be fun.
Right. And if this totally blows up, well, we won't do it again for another couple of years, probably anyway. So let's buckle up, though. You ready to dive in, AJ?
Yeah, so give us the prompt so we understand what is leading ChatGPT to give us these scenarios.
Okay, yeah, so basically what I said was that I co-lead a podcast called the Church Revitalization Podcast. We are going to do an episode called, I don't actually know if this is the title we're using, so if it's different from what's actually posted, forgive us, but what would you do is what I said, where we test our skills on handling common/complex situations that struggling churches might face. Come up with 3 one-paragraph scenarios/case studies for us to diagnose. And I also asked for them to be very specific situations rather than like macro trends,
Hmm.
which would be a little bit more difficult given the one paragraph nature. So that's
Okay.
the prompt.
Okay.
All right, AJ, are you ready
Here we go.
for scenario number one?
Number one. What is it?
All right, it says scenario number one, the financial crisis.
Hmm.
That's the title. St. Andrew's Church has recently discovered a significant financial shortfall due to a series of unexpected expenses and a decrease in tithes and offerings. The church's savings are almost depleted, and they are struggling to pay staff salaries and maintain the building.
Hmm.
The Finance Committee is considering drastic measures, such as selling part of the church property or cutting key ministries. But these options are highly contentious among the congregation. How would you address the financial crisis while keeping the church community united and focused on their mission?
Hmm. Okay. So my first question that we don't have the answer to is
Actually,
has
I just want to give props first to
it's
ChatGPT for
sure. Okay.
this is a pretty, I mean, not an uncommon scenario and
Yeah.
pretty
That
good.
totally sounds like something, like when we're monitoring the chat on our website, that totally sounds like something somebody might have written in. And
Yeah,
that's initially what they're thinking, because what they're feeling is the money thing.
right.
Now, what led up to the money thing, we don't know. You and I can explore that now. So my first question is, has attendance decreased as well as this money? So there's two money things happening, though. Let's point that out. Unplanned for expenses, which could happen to anybody. The air conditioner goes out, the roof problem, those are kind of the big ticket items. Um, and so, that a healthy church could have that happen, and an unhealthy church could have that happen. And
Right, right.
if there's not been adequate savings for that, then that can be a problem. But then the other thing it said, how did it phrase it? Also, tithes are down.
It says decrease in tithes and offerings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that
So
suggests that hints at declining attendance and declining
yeah,
engagement, at least. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, or not. So has there been a
Yeah.
scandal in which attendance
Oh,
hasn't
sure.
really decreased, but money has, because people are voting with their wallets on, how they're unhappy with the way things are going. So
Yeah.
there's a few things that could be happening here, and so as I kind of same line of thinking I was kind of running with a second ago on the unintended expenses or unplanned for. Why hadn't there been a little bit of a nest egg, to be able to cover some kinds of things?
Yeah.
So okay, so those are my initial thoughts and kind of questions. What are you thinking right now?
Well, I'm thinking a similar thing. I'm thinking, okay, we would describe when we do a church ministry analysis with a church, we will sometimes talk about how the giving and the attendance trends, which are the things that most people can see or feel pretty acutely, those are those, uh, if you're thinking about an iceberg, those are the above the waterline issues that you don't need to be a church consultant to see that there's an issue. But like you, I'm wondering what's beneath the waterline, and
Hmm.
so I do think that to some degree jumping straight to we need to sell property or cut key ministries or anything like that, these drastic measures to solve the financial shortfall, and debating what the best route would be is, I understand the impulse and the need even to try to make those decisions quickly, but divorcing those discussions from where are we going as a church is foolish. So I think the reality is that in order to address their key, um, actually, one of the things that's not listed in here, it says that they're struggling to pay staff salaries and maintain the building. I'd be curious what's their staffing
Hmm.
level, and they overstaffed for the size of church that they are?
Yeah.
And while no church wants to lay anybody off, obviously, if they've got 5 or 6 staff and they're a church of 100 people, that's
Hmm.
going to be inevitable.
Yeah.
They can't sustain that. And you might think that's crazy. There's no such church. Trust
Yeah.
me, there are. uh, and those are hard conversations that you and I have had with churches where we go, you're overstaffed. and we have to bring this into alignment. So let's start moving towards some advice. So I mean, I think the first piece of advice, and this is maybe going to sound pretty repetitive. I don't know what these other two situations are going to be, but I imagine it might come up. Is it before you make a strategic decision, you need to be sure that you have a direction for where you're trying to go, because that should influence the decision that you make.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got a church I'm working with. I'm going to avoid specifics, but they have a facility decision to make coming up, AJ, and they've asked for my help in trying to discern a direction, because they have a couple of different options they can go through on the facility issue, and they're asking this exact question: should we do this or should we do that? And it's not just about dollars and cents; it's about what makes the most sense in connection to our vision.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I don't know. We don't know how much money they have. Like, are they going to be insolvent tomorrow? You know, how much time do they have to be able to think about this? But if they've got at least a few months, I would say take a month at least to figure out where we're going directionally before you pull the trigger on something financially.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, so I don't know. Our setup to this is it's virtually impossible for us to go, here's what your plan of action should be. I think we can only really speak through, and
Speculate.
I think this
Yeah.
was helpful for the audience. What are the right questions to ask? And that's basically what you just started to do. Let's figure out the right questions to ask. So yeah, you just brought up a good point. I think another, and we did this episode not too long ago either, about making sure that you've got good information. So does the church have good data on like what their attendance has been and what their giving has been? Are there trend lines that they can look back on? Because while perhaps, whatever the scenario is in this fake situation that is these like unintended expenses, um, roof or air conditioner or whatever it might be, is that something that just happened and now all of a sudden we're like, oh boy, we know we've been on the edge financially for a long time and this is really gonna kill us?
Oh, well,
Or
actually,
were
on
we
that
not
point,
really aware?
AJ, kind of going back to the first line here, I'm looking at it. St. Andrew's Church has recently discovered a significant financial shortfall.
Okay.
It-
So
Were they not paying attention? Who
yeah,
was not paying attention? How do you discover a significant financial shortfall?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Or was there something sinister happening? I mean, has there been an embezzlement? So
right.
there's lots of
Who
there's
was
lots
yeah,
of
who was
questions.
asleep at the switch, man? Like,
Yeah.
not how do you not notice
Hmm.
that there's a shortfall?
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
we've got to be monitoring these things. Yeah, people have got to have good information to make good decisions. And so yeah, perhaps, I mean, sometimes, yeah, selling a piece of land. I mean, I worked with a church last year that and I mean, they admittedly they have grown very small. I mean, the church has just declined greatly. They definitely had unused property that had not had any use for them in a long time. And it helped them to sell off a piece of property, to help keep them going financially for a longer period of time. So that was a good strategic move. They knew there was not going to be anything useful for them. It was another church nearby. It was going to be useful for that church, and they made that financial transaction, and that has helped them at least get to the point where they were able to go through the strategic envisioning process and try to make some better plans for the future. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, Scott.
I
We can't come up with a whole lot of conclusions on this one, probably based on what we know.
I think my order of operations, if I was talking to them, is I would say, assuming that they had enough runway, like they've got 4 or 5 months before they have to pull the trigger on any decision, I would say, let's do an assessment first, like we would always say.
And perhaps even a financial audit.
Yeah, potentially. If I have had that conversation actually recently with the church where they had a situation like this. And I said, I think before we do anything, you need to go through an audit to make sure someone hasn't stolen some money. Because the particulars around that situation were very suspicious. But um, assuming that's not the case here, let's go through an assessment to figure out what's going on. let's go through the strategic envisioning process so we can determine some direction before, because we know what our options are. We can lay off staff, we can cut programs, we can sell property. All three of those are viable options. One of the things that we do in our church ministry analysis also, though, is we take a look at how you're allocating your budget. So even if you sold a piece of property, it might just buy you time if your spending's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if your personnel expenses are exceeding 50% of your church's revenue income by a lot, if you're spending 70%, and you're not a church plant, and that's you've got a kind of a narrow window where that's going to be the case. But if you're an established church and you're spending 70% of your income on personnel, that's not sustainable. You can't do that, especially if you've got multiple staff and so on. So, I mean, taking a look at our spending, we'd want to diagnose that and figure out if anything's out of control, because no matter what solution you make, it can't fix an out of control budget.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then once you know where you're going directionally, then you can make a decision. Because selling property might be a huge mistake if you're going to need that property as part of your vision moving forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. If you've got, like, I've worked with some churches, they own 3 houses, and they're using one is reserved as a parsonage, one is for missionaries, and then they've just got another one. And if they were falling short on finances, I'd be like, yeah, sell the house.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, I forget how exactly the scenario was phrased, but it sounds like, there's a couple of different factions maybe are coming together in the congregation that are disagreeing on the
Yeah.
solution to go forward. And so I
Right.
would also add, in these kinds of, really difficult and uncomfortable situations, communication has got to be very clear, has to be united. First of all, leadership of the church needs to be united, but we need to be able to present facts and reality to the congregation. As much as possible, emotion needs to be removed from the decision-making process so that everybody is clear. Like, here's really what has happened. Here's what we have to work with. Here's the options that we have. And presenting that along with what you said with, like, this is our mission. Here's where
we're going.
Yeah, this is the
In
direction
light
we're
of where
trying to
we're
go.
going, the leadership of the church believes that this is the pathway for us to get out of this financial situation.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is arguing about the different financial choices, then it's totally emotional, and it's just your opinion against someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tie it to something bigger. This
Mm-hmm.
is where we're going. And in light of this is the most viable option for us financially. And this is why we don't want to sell this piece of property, or this is why we're not laying off this staff person, or this is why we're not cutting this program. But if you can't tie your rationale for your plan financially
Mm-hmm.
to where you're going directionally, then of course it's going to be contentious. So you have to unify around the vision first, and then you can make a case
Yeah.
about the financial strategic decision. But
Yeah.
most churches don't do this. They just see the problem and they're trying to make a case for what's most logical.
Right.
And that's
I think kind of a scenario that might be able to present this, just to kind of think through it. Like, what if that piece of property was a piece of property that they've owned for 5 years, and because of the vision for supporting the city, they were going to build a shelter, a homeless shelter, or some kind of a temporary shelter on that property. And they've had a capital campaign going, and they're at they've raised 30% of what they need. It's probably still a few years away. So, like, plans were made for that. They had a vision for it. They're working towards something. And now people are like, well, it's taken a long time to make that happen. Why don't we just sell that property to take care of our financial shortfall? That would be a really clear way that he go, well, hold on, we have a future vision for that, and we've been making progress towards it. That should not be the choice that we make. Maybe there's a better choice for how to do that. So I'm just making up a situation in which to think through future vision that would help you make a financial decision.
Yep. Good. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The title for this one, scenario number 2, the cultural shift.
Uh-oh.
Riverside Church is located in a neighborhood that has undergone significant demographic changes over the past decade. We've seen this a time or two. What was once a predominantly middle-class suburban area is now a diverse, multi-ethnic urban community. The church's current programs and worship style do not resonate with the new residents, and attendance has dropped. Efforts to introduce more um, inclusive practices have been met with resistance from longtime members who fear losing their church's identity. How would you navigate this cultural shift to make the church more welcoming and relevant to its changing community? It's a good one.
Yeah,
Um,
this is much more common.
yeah, yeah. I don't love the phraseology of very ChatGPT. Efforts
Yeah,
to include more inclusive practices have,
yeah, that's
yeah, I kind of don't blame the long-term members if that's the language we're using.
well,
Um, so I wanted to read it exactly how it was phrased, but for purposes of how we would actually help a church in this situation, let's say efforts to introduce more outreach-oriented practices.
and multi-ethnic yeah, connection. I mean, that was the specifics that
That's
it gave
the,
us in
yeah,
the
right.
scenario. So we're going to apply the word inclusive to that and not anything outside of that.
Yes. Okay.
So
Yeah. Just wanted to set the ground rules here for, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, probably in some ways this is maybe a simpler, I think this is a more narrow discussion than the previous one, which had a lot of questions that needed to be asked. And we've seen this one certainly a lot. I don't know. So for this one, I always begin these conversations by re reaffirming the Great Commission, first of all, that we are called to make disciples of all nations. So if a church has been embedded in a community for a long time and the community around it has changed and the church has not, there's first of all a fundamental question that the leadership needs to answer. Do we believe God has sovereignly placed us here to reach our community, no matter what that community looks like? I think that is just a fundamental question that leadership of the church first needs to answer, and it needs to be presented to the entire congregation in whatever form or format or venue, and reaffirm this yes or no, which is an interesting thing to ask because, you know, we have free will, and if we say no, we think we need to leave, that we believe God has called this church together to minister to, you know, uh suburbanites of, you know, that are only white or whatever that, you know, the original scenario might have been. I don't know. Um, and so, no, I think we should leave this place and
Yeah, I
just,
think race was implied but not explicit in
yeah.
the
So let's
description.
go. We're a suburban church and we're no longer suburban. We should move further out so that we are suburban again. Um, they're free to make that choice. I think I don't know. Those conversations seems like would be hard to have. And I would be interested to hear what exactly, you know, unless everybody's super like, oh yes, Holy Spirit is speaking, keep being suburban, get out of town. This isn't the right place for you. Or, hey, our building is here. We've been here a long time. Um, we can continue to bring the gospel to people regardless of what the outside the outside area looks like around our church. So that's how I would want to proceed.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What are your thoughts, and how are you thinking through this initially?
So I guess with the first scenario, we had this financial thing. We need to make a decision based on the finances. I think, and the solution in my mind starts with vision and just going, where are we going before we make a financial decision? We need to know where we're going as it relates to our vision. This to me, I think you've hinted at this already. It's related to mission. You know, what is the mission of our church? The mission of our church is to make and mature disciples.
Yeah.
That God has called every church to live out the Great Commission. Do we believe? Do we have a firm commitment to the Great Commission or not? That's the first question. And if the church goes, not, no, then I think we have to accept that reality. That church has to accept that reality and go, then we're not really a church anymore. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're a chapel. Um, we're we're a place where people can come and pray, but we're not a church. This is a place for people to come together for prayer. And when we die, this place dies. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think that's a horrible thing and a sad thing, but at least it would be an honest thing.
Hmm.
But what we can't do is say, this is a church that believes in the Great Commission, and also we don't want to reach our neighbors. Those things are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So that's where I would start, is with mission.
Yeah.
From there, if we go, okay, we do believe in the Great Commission, we do believe that this church is called to make and mature disciples, starting in our neighborhood, then of course it's going to be hard. But I think what we have to begin to help as best we can, people shift their perspective. So I think the perspective is, obviously it's internally focused and saying, well, we're here, we've been here, and everything else is different. Like, we were here first, like that mindset of, we were here before you were here, so
Hmm.
you should have to do what we're doing, versus kind of taking more of a missionary mindset and imagine, this is something I've said with a lot of churches I've worked with. Imagine your church building being picked up, by a helicopter and being set in Uganda. And if it was set down in Uganda, what would you do immediately? First thing you would do as a church, you'd want to learn the language. What do people speak? How do they speak? What's the culture here? What do they care about? How would we need to conduct our services so that they connect with the way that people think and understand the world here? You would not think that that's weird at all. And in fact, you would think you'd be a bad missionary. You wouldn't want to fund a missionary who wasn't doing those kinds of things. Likewise, your church, even though it is physically in the same location, it's in a totally different world now. And so you have to have that same missionary mindset. I want to know, who are my neighbors? What language do they speak? I don't just mean like they probably speak English too, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what, how do they understand the world? What's their worldview? How can how can I form a service or conduct a service in a way that they can hear and understand the truth?
Hmm.
Those are all questions, but I think it has to flow out of mission first, AJ. Whereas the last question was more about vision, I think this one is rooted more in mission.
Yeah, I agree. It could be vision components, and maybe the church in the past did have that when they were suburban and there was 5 miles between them and the urban center.
Yeah.
Did they used to do outreach downtown when it was removed from them? So, yeah, I mean, we can look back at some history. I mean, what was the founding of this church about? Because it could be that things have just changed and it hasn't really been living out perhaps a previous vision that had been set forth, along with the mission. It might have just become a club over the years. So yeah, I mean, the other thing, these are tough leadership decisions to make. But if just again, hypothetically, if I don't know if there's an elder board in this church, and then there's maybe a couple of pastors, and maybe a couple of other part-time volunteer staff, I don't know. If the decision makers of the church, first with the elders and pastors, if they really believe this is our place and we want to reach our neighbors, then there's individual choices to be made by the people that are a part of this church.
Mhm.
You can't lock the doors and make sure they don't leave. And all we can do is present biblical truth to them, what we believe we're here for, what our mission is, and then people can just make their own choice. They can leave or they can stay. Um, but
Yeah.
you can't have it both ways, where like, we're here to do this and then you choose to stay and fight it. That's comes back on the individual, and that's the wrong thing to do. I mean, they
I
can
I
they can
do
go
think
to some
that,
other church.
yeah, I mean, I said this earlier, but I do think it has to start, like, in terms of order of operations. It starts with mission and having that honest conversation with the church. I'm just kind of assuming that this is based on the way it's described, that it's probably a fairly small church at this point. Maybe under 100, and maybe even fewer than that, maybe under 50. And that's an assumption I'm making, not it's not in the scenario. And maybe the people do. I think that you actually have to have both options on the table. where you go, are we going to be a Great Commission oriented church? And I think as a leadership, you have to be willing to hear both yes or no. And if the answer is yes, that sets you on a different trajectory on how you can turn it around.
Yeah.
But if the answer is no, then the conversation has to shift to go, all right, well then what's our legacy plan? Because we're going to have this church will die. Um, maybe not tomorrow, but over the next 5, 10, 15 years, what are we doing? Are we going to, if you're part of a denomination, you might have rules, but if you're an independent church, what are we going to do? Are we going to sell the property and that's going to go towards church planting? Are we going to donate the property to a church planting organization? Are we going to, what's going to happen with our assets? You need to start making an end of life plan for
Mm.
when that time comes,
Yeah.
so that maybe at least in the church's death, it can fuel Great Commission ministry,
Hmm.
even if they've decided we are done doing that now.
Yeah.
And those are hard conversations, but you have to have an honest one.
Yeah.
I don't think you can force the Great Commission down their throats if they're
No, you
wanting
can't.
to.
You can't. Which, it would require then the pastor, if the pastor feels like we should be living out the Great Commission locally, and the congregation says different, then the pastor or maybe other elders, other leaders have a choice to make then for themselves as well. I
Yeah,
mean, the pastor might be like, I'm not called to lead a dying church that doesn't want to live out the Great Commission in its Jerusalem. And therefore you're going to have to end up finding somebody else to lead you to death. It's not going to be for me.
right.
Uh,
We need to hire a chaplain,
yeah,
who's that's what they're doing. They're just caring for the members as they pass. And again,
yeah,
I'm not saying I think that's a good thing. I am saying there are more churches that at least need to be honest about what we are. We're a chapel. We're not a church.
hmm,
We have a chaplain and not a pastor. We don't have a leader here.
hmm,
At least
yeah,
it would be honest. And
right,
and and at least then you can make an end of life plan for your church that maybe could bless the the evangelistic arms
yeah,
of the church. At least that would be on it. That would be way better than it struggling and pretending like it's not dying, and then when it does die, it just gets sold and turned into a bar or something. I mean, which
hmm,
is what's happening a lot. So
yeah.
honest conversation.
Well, I mean, and we say this all the time in regards to mission and vision. In the absence of stated mission and vision, there frequently is less conflict because the future has not been articulated. Purpose has not been articulated. And so people can just kind of cruise along. Like everybody's happy. And the reason everybody's happy is because everybody is subconsciously accepting of their own mission and vision. You just are applying your own idea of what the mission and vision is. And
Mm.
of course, you're happy to follow your own. And until somebody puts up a roadblock and says, this is, wrong way over, this is where we're actually going, then there's no conflict and there's no choice to make. So, this being called to question, in like Robert's Rules of Order, there's a call to question. We have to put this on the table because time has forced a scenario upon us. And when the mission then comes to question, then choice has to be made. It has to be articulated, and then the individual choice is made. Do I agree with this? Is this what I want to be a part of? And that question will end up being asked by the individual congregation members and the members of
Yeah.
leadership. So,
All right.
all right,
I think we covered
that's a
that one.
tough one, but a common one. So maybe you can
Common
relate to
one.
that.
All right. Last one. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. This one's called the vision conflict.
Okay.
Trinity Chapel's newly appointed senior pastor has a bold vision for the church's future. Okay, I don't even have to read any further. This is already a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
I can
Okay.
already
All right.
see the conversation we're about to have. All right, keep going.
Okay. Including launching a multi-campus model and investing heavily in digital ministry.
Okay.
However,
Bold vision.
the church's leadership team and congregation are split on this vision. Some are excited about the potential growth, while others worry about the cost and complexity of such changes. The lack of consensus is causing friction and hindering progress. How would you facilitate a productive dialogue and help the church move forward with a unified vision?
Wow.
So
So
I'm
much.
assuming, here's a baseline assumption here.
Okay.
This might be a slightly larger church. Like, let's assume
If it even had the possibility of going multi-site and all this stuff, they got a base to work with. Yeah.
yeah, let's assume this church is 500 to 1,000 people, probably.
Yeah.
So they're not already a mega church or something like that, but
Yeah.
they're perhaps they're hitting the limits of what their facility can accommodate. So you probably made that assumption already based on this scenario, but let's just assume that for the purposes of this
Yeah, it's
discussion.
probably not a church of 80 and their new pastor is like,
I
we're
got a
we're going to have
multi-site model.
campuses
Yeah.
all over the place. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing that I thought was, what in the world did this hiring process look like?
That's the first thing I thought too. Yeah.
And we've dealt with some churches that that have been looking for a pastor, and oh my gosh, sometimes search committees are really not in a good position to make good decisions and ask good questions and vet
Yeah.
well. But okay, so that I don't know, that's where I'm at now. But I'm still going to go backwards from there and say, where was the church in its mission and vision before it started looking for a pastor? So it kind of feels like this church didn't have all their ducks in a row already. They had not been through the Malthus Group strategic envisioning process and really kind of felt like they had a good plan for the future before they were looking for a new pastor. So, I mean, it's an interesting sentence, new pastor has a bold vision. So were
It's
they
a
aware
red
of
flag. It's like this is a huge red flag. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What had he spoken about this vision previously and in the hiring process or not? So okay, well I'll let you keep going.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm right where you're at. And I think that this actually might be news potentially to some of our listeners. They might be thinking, well, shouldn't we be hiring a pastor who's got a bold vision? And I guess the response to that would be you want to hire a senior pastor who can lead a bold vision, not who comes in and imports his own bold vision. The church should have a bold vision. If you're in between pastors, the church should take the time to figure out, where are we going, independent of who the senior pastor is. Where are we going as a church? So that then you can hire someone who can champion and lead that bold vision. And of
Yeah.
course, it's going to shift. Of course, his personality is going to impact it. He's going to have some ideas that shouldn't be contrary to that vision, but complementary to it. And you might go, "Oh man, we hadn't even thought of that. That's great." So it's not like you don't want someone who's visionary.
Yeah.
That's really, it's great, obviously. But the thing that was the red flag to us is that he came with a bold vision,
Mm-hmm.
and that it, based on the scenario as it's described, it doesn't sound like that was a pre-existing bold vision that the church had.
Yeah.
And that's the conflict. So I don't want you to hear us say, "Oh no, it's bad that a senior pastor has a bold vision."
Mm-mm.
No, that's not the part, but it's that he's newly appointed. He came in with this, and it doesn't sound like this was something that was already on the radar of the church. In an ideal scenario, if your church is between pastors, you should take the time to figure out what is God's direction for our church, and then how can we find someone who can complement that and champion that.
Yeah.
And so, to me, this whole thing, it's like, I, I think that honestly, both sides need to stand down, both this pastor and the church.
Yes.
That would be my advice is, rather than try to reconcile these things, you both need to stand down and go, let's start over. We
Yeah.
we did not do this collaboratively to begin
Mm-hmm.
with, which is the correct way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that, and then let's see where this goes. Uh, and at the end of the day, the pastor might go, "Man, I can't lead this church," and he might have to go. Um, if at the end of that process it's not a vision he feels like he can champion. Um, but better that than him try to force through a vision that isn't owned by the church, and
Hmm.
he ends up leaving anyway, and it maybe splits the church.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think
I
that's good
say
advice.
I call foul on the whole hiring process. I call foul on the pastor for trying to force something through like this. Doesn't understand good change management skills, obviously. So I
Yeah.
call fouls on both sides.
Yeah, man, I agree. This actually might be the simplest of the three scenarios to kind of process through. So yeah, I think we need to have a collaborative effort now, and we've got to reestablish from the base up, and that means let's start back at mission. Do we agree on mission? Yes, great. Okay, then let's keep going until we get to vision, which this is another, and it even said it was a vision question. Yeah, what is this going to look like for the future?
Hmm.
What are the strengths of our church that we could accomplish that kind of vision? It could be the
Hold on a
truth.
minute. Let's not skip past what you just said,
Yeah.
because I think this is something that people might miss. I think that people might intuitively go, and I think I maybe even have hinted at this when I was talking a second ago, that we need to retreat on the vision, start over again on the vision. But what you said is right. Actually, we always go back further than the vision question to the even more fundamental things first, because we might actually have disagreement at the more foundational level that we need to resolve
Yeah,
before we can get
like
to the
our
vision issue.
number two scenario, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I just didn't want us to blow past that and just go,
Mm,
hold on a minute. No, actually, it's why strategic envisioning is built on a cumulative process. We start with mission first,
mm, mhm.
and then our values, and then we build a discipleship pathway. And only then do we go, all right, now what's the vision for this moving forward?
Yeah. And it could be that, by doing it that way, by going one block at a time as we build this up, that the church goes, wow, you know what? uh, that does sound like a really great vision. I think we could do that. It might have been so far out of what they were thinking that they had a knee-jerk reaction and just recoiled from it. But building this one piece at a time from the ground up, they might find, oh my gosh, we accidentally hired a great pastor and that he has this big vision. We're super excited about this now that we see why it would be a great vision and pursuit for our church. So yeah. I mean, I think this is it's up in the air scenario how it could turn out. It might be great. Might accidentally have been a great hire. Could have been a horrible hire.
Could have been a horrible hire. Yeah, and I still would he may be fine, but I still would call foul on pastor for not understanding this is not what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you coming in and going, this is what we're going to do? Unless he brought this up, I mean, maybe it's possible that he talked about it uh, with the committee, right?
Hmm.
And they all thought it was great. But very often the search team isn't the same as maybe there's one or two elders on there, but it's not the whole
Yeah.
eldership.
I
And
wonder,
so,
is
yeah,
this maybe Trinity Chapel is actually Riverside from scenario number two, and they hired a new pastor.
yeah, right. So I don't know, man. Yeah, this obviously more nuanced detail would be helpful to figure out how this happened in the first place, but clearly it was a bad hiring process that either allowed the church to hire someone who is so reckless that they would just come in and go, we're doing this,
Yeah.
or was so misleading to him to
Hmm.
make him think that the church was on board with something that they weren't,
Yeah,
which
we've seen
happens
that.
a lot too.
Hmm.
In any case, I call foul on the whole thing, and there's really no other solution than to retreat
Yeah.
and go, let's work on this together. And only then can you make a decision on moving forward. And obviously, uh, this gets to sound self-interested, although this is a fake scenario, so it doesn't matter. They should hire in someone from the outside because they're not going to be able to be objective about it. So they're going to need some outside counsel to help them facilitate a
Yeah.
process that helps them decide upon a unified vision.
You just cannot you cannot have enough, I think, transparency and honesty in the hiring process on both sides of the equation. Too often the church is selling itself like a used car, and maybe do a little bit of cleanup, maybe fix up a couple of things so that we look as good as we can. We don't really want to talk about some of the underlying issues that we've been kind of aware of, but we didn't really want to diagnose yet. We're just hoping that we're going to hire a good mechanic, and or we're going to sell this to a good do-it-yourselfer, and he'll be able to fix these things on his own. And then on the pastor side, it's every resume skill was employed. Make everything, no matter how minor, sound like it was a huge win. And that's just the wrong way. This is the wrong
Yeah.
way. I think if a church is just honest, like, look, we have had some struggles, and here's where we've at. We've not really been able to get through this. And the pastor is like, you know what? I've dealt with some of this stuff, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean, or maybe I've never dealt with that before. But you know what? I feel like I'm up to that challenge, and we can work together on that. The other thing is, so often churches rebound higher, and they look for the opposite of what they had. So this church, perhaps they were like, yes, let's get a pastor that's like this, has this great big
Exciting. Yeah.
personality, and oh my gosh, because our previous guy was, kind
He
of,
was a
he was
wallflower. Yeah.
he was old, and he was just not very exciting, and he didn't really have any ideas for the future. And not that one or the other is inherently bad, but we just have to go in with eyes wide open and talk things out. So, okay, that was another interesting and good one. So,
I gotta say, I'm gonna give props to ChatGPT for devising these 3 case studies for us to go through. I thought that was fun. I hope this was helpful. We're gonna try to put together an article of some kind, perhaps illuminating the principles that we were trying to think through that helped us to solve these problems. And if your church is experiencing a challenge, maybe you're going, well, that wasn't one of the 3 things that my church is facing, but I have this other problem. Perhaps you can apply the same logic, or of course, you can always reach out to us at leadership@malfersgroup.com. We would love to help you sort through your situation. So you can read today's show notes at malfersgroup.com/251, 251. This is
yep.
the episode 251 of the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Let me also jump in, Scott, because
Yeah.
this is middle of July, end of July, and your church probably is, it's kind of that quiet summertime. It's quiet summertime for us too. We're not traveling as much because a lot of times churches don't want to begin processes in the summer. And so we've been working on some internal things, but it's also a time in which I want to remind you that we need your support. And we've got a huge fall coming up, domestically and internationally, and we need your church to become a partner with us to help make that happen. So you haven't heard us talk about a lot of things we've been going around the world to do, because we haven't been. That starts again in August. So go to malfersgroup.com/Gideon to read about our funding initiative to build up an army of partners that can help make our ministry happen around the world, where our nonprofit support due to you allows it to happen at no cost to those churches. So malfersgroup.com/Gideon, read about our vision and mission around the world, and please join us in this so that we can have a successful fall and into 2025, because plans are already being laid. So just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing, so I'm glad you did.
Good.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week on the Church Revitalization Podcast. We will see you next week.